stock. Sorry, M. Flynn, I don't know anything about that company. But what I can do, like I said, leave the question for me for next week, and I will research it and give you an opinion on it. Let's see here. How would you approach buying real estate with a strong stock portfolio? Is it as straightforward as liquidating my stocks in order to get the cash? I recall you once mentioning rich people don't sell; they keep acquiring. Yeah, well, there's a couple ways you can make a real estate move if you have a strong stock portfolio. Now, remember, real estate moves kind of come down to a few different factors, among which would be your existing assets, right, which your stocks are part of your asset portfolio, your cash flow, right, income, right. A lot of realtors look, doesn't matter if you have a business that's generating a bunch of money, they like to see, a certain type of after income after expenses, like a profitability. So one of the challenges that I have found that that business owners have is that on one hand you have your accountants that are going to minimize your tax bill by making sure that all your spending is done in a certain way to keep your taxes low. But then if you go buy a property, they treat you like an employee. They look at your, not your, they don't have a W-2, so they only look at your after tax income. So they'll literally walk away concluding that you don't have any money when really you're doing better than everybody else. It's kind of frustrating. Believe me, I know I've gone through that. And so they'll look at, but they will look at your cash flow slash income. They'll obviously credit score. All those factors come into play. Now, if you have real estate and you're thinking about, you have stocks and you're looking to make a real estate move, you could liquidate stock and use that as part of your down payment on your property. Another option is you could borrow against the stock that you own, and then keep the ownership and then use that money toward the property. But remember that if you borrow against the stock, then that's going to count in terms of your debt to equity ratios and debt to income ratios and all that stuff. So one thing that rich people tend to do is they don't really they don't a lot of times they won't sell, like ownership and control. If you want to be rich, one of the things I advise you to do is to train yourself to pay very close attention to ownership and control. Ownership and control are two different things, but they're both very important. Rich people want to own things, and because they get that's how you get that equity appreciation. And when you control things, you can use the things that you own to pursue your interests. So like there's a guy Tony Francisi that has a great YouTube channel. He's a former gangster, and he used to be with these mafia families. I can't remember which one. I don't know which crime family it was, but it was one of the big ones. And he tells all these stories, and he tells a story about how he got into a dispute with John Gotti over business, and there was this market they were competing over, and he wanted to buy John out. He offered to buy him out, and John Gotti said, "No, you don't buy me out. I buy you out." The Colombo family. Thank you, Kendall. So Kendall probably watches the same YouTube channel. I like Francisi's stories. They're really interesting, and I think you can actually learn a little bit from the mafia families. Now, I obviously they came to a bad ending. Like when they started with the RICO laws and all that, a lot of them ended up in prison. So obviously their whole model wasn't perfect. But the way he talks about negotiation and the way they talk about power and the way they talk about sending the right message, the way they talk about resolving disputes, I think is absolutely brilliant. Because he literally got into this bona fide argument with John Gotti, where there's a lot of egos flying around and everything else. And it was like he said, yeah, so we realized that I wasn't going to budge. He wasn't going to budge. So we had a problem. So then they went to solve the problem. See, that part about solving the problem that's the part some people forget. Some people scream and holler about the problem. They'll cut you off. They'll never speak to you again. They'll go bananas, go berserk, get triggered about the problem. But there are some people who say, let's go solve the problem. And one of the things that he said that I still remember was he said when he made that comment about how Gotti was like, you don't buy me out, I'll buy you out. Well, that's about, again, ownership and control. Ownership and control is really important, at least to those people in those five families that had all this wealth. And I think it should also be important for you. And what has occurred with the black community that you got to be careful about is that there is no culture that's really instilled in you from birth that talks about ownership and control. The culture is because you grow up under the assumption that everything is already owned and controlled by someone else. When I grew up, there was no conversation about how you can own the restaurant and control it and decide who to hire. It was, oh, the white man controls the restaurant. He owns it. And the best you can do is get him to hire you, right? Like so ownership, the same way that people think that all the rapping and all the basketball and all the football should be done by black people, right? And when it's time to build a rocket ship to Mars or form a multi-billion-dollar corporation, that's what white people do. That's why, like, if you look at a lot of corporations, whether you're talking about Tesla or Facebook or Apple, you'll look at their employee meetings where they gather all their engineers that are designing the software, and it's like a bunch of white people and Indians and stuff like that. But then when they have a party and there's a performer, then there's a black guy up on stage who's rapping because everybody, they're like, oh, that's what those people do, right? Or I remember that when I went to a Denver Nuggets game, and I remember I walked past the University of Denver, and they had a row where they showed 200 of their award-winning professors. And I said, I told my wife is a professor just like me. I said, I bet you I won't see one single black person on here. And I was actually wrong. I saw one black woman out of 200 people. I did not see one single black man on that screen. And nobody thought that was out of the ordinary, right? But then I get to the Nuggets game. I look down on the court. A bunch of the players are black. I looked also on the screen where they talked about the entertainment for the next game, and it was a black transgender person by the name of Big Frida. Big Frida, I guess, is a guy who identifies as a woman who goes around and performs minstrel shows all over the country, right? So there's kind of like this idea that there's a place for different people, and there are things that you're supposed to do. So ownership and control is never really something that many of our families believe that it's supposed to be, our objective and our destiny, right? So I encourage you to just flip that script, that you want to own and control something. You don't have to own and control everything, though. That's another misconception people have also. Everybody thinks that, that there's just, or a lot of people think that there's complete shame in having a job, and that you always have to be the boss, that it always has to be yours. And that's a very unproductive way to view economic growth and wealth, right? Because if you and I are working together and you always feel like everything has to be yours, well, then we're not going to be partners for very long. We're going to be competitors because we're going to both be competing for that same piece of pie and harming each other, right? So the ability to form a cooperative, the most nourishing economic environments are those that are cooperative. Cooperative means that I'm going to own a piece of this, but I want you to do well, because the better you do, the better I do, the better we do, because we all pour into each other and we work together as a team, which allows us to accomplish things and get things done. That's why, going back to the mafia example, what do? They operate as families, right? That word family is extremely important. There's nothing that breaks the family. Okay. So the other point I want to go back to is, earlier we were talking about Chad Ochocinco and this guy, YK Osiris. And for those of you that got here late, YK Osiris is an entertainer who I'd never heard of before this week. And he goes on Instagram, and he buys these $300,000 earrings, and he brags about the fact that he bought these $325,000 earrings as if that's something to brag about, right? Look at me. I just gave the white man $325,000 of my children's wealth. That gives me status. And the fact that there are people who applaud that, who are excited for him, that right there explains a big chunk of what you need to understand about why black wealth is declining, is that you're cheering for all the wrong things. You have people that cheer for destruction. They cheer for death. They cheer for bad things, right? And so Chad Ochocinco comes in, who's a former NFL player. He's maybe about 50 years old, and he shows on a video, hey, look, I went to Claire's and I bought a $10 pair of earrings, and I'm shining just like you. And obviously what Chad did makes a little bit more sense, because here's the thing: if you're rich already and people know you're rich, and you'll know a lot of rich people wear fake jewelry. Did y'all know that? Like, a lot of rich people don't wear real jewelry, because they know that if you know that they're rich, you're going to assume that the fake jewelry is real. You're just going to assume that, because a lot of times, most people, to the naked eye, you can't tell the difference between that which is real, that which is fake. So if Kim Kardashian comes in and she's got a big old diamond on her finger and it's a cubic zirconium, are you really going to think that that's a fake diamond? No, you're going to say, oh, well, she's Kim Kardashian. Of course it's real, right? And and I've done that, right? I bought a watch. And because people know that I have money, I'm not going to say and pretend to be poor. I talk about wealth. Of course I'm rich, but I'm not bragging about it. It's just a fact. And so with this watch, I go places and people will say, "Oh, that's a really nice watch. Is that a Rolex? Is that a Cartier or whatever the hell? I don't know these brands." I'm like, "No, actually, I think it might be a Walmart special. I don't remember, or Target or something. Amazon. I don't remember where I bought it, but it wasn't. It probably cost me $30, right? But when I show up and you know that I have some money, you're assuming that what I'm wearing is expensive because you know I have money. And people forget that fundamental, really important rule that most rich people get rich by not giving their money away. So when you are a person like this entertainer YK Osiris, and you come from nothing, and you say, well, now that I'm having a come up, I need everyone to see that I'm coming up. I need to prove to the world that I'm doing better than I was doing before. So I'm going to do this by behaving the way I think rich people behave. Then that's where you get the whole like I spent $300,000 on some diamonds, and this is me showing everybody on Instagram. And now mind you though, as a rapper, because a certain component, a certain segment of hip hop culture is just honestly just stupid culture. It's very ignorant and very self destructive. That's why 200 rappers died this year, because the culture is very destructive. You can say it's a career boost, right? There are some artists that, as a legitimate business investment, will say, I need to act like a big buffoon and show off everything I have so that I will get bigger, right? Because you have that backwardness of the industry where people really think if I show off a lot more, if I act the bigger clown I am, the more records I sell, the more people will follow me, the more people will talk about me. And that's probably true for this guy, because I'm talking about him because of what he did, right? So he's probably right. Like, yeah, if I show off, then that's going to get me more attention. Okay, fine, I get that point. But the thing that's interesting to me is that when you get to the point where you have someone who has never had money, who says, I'm going to buy $300,000 diamonds to show everybody what I bought. What he's doing is he's behaving in a way that he thinks rich people behave, when really people that really have money, that's the way they actually can tell that you don't have any money. That's the way they can tell that you're not used to having money, is because you're telling everybody how much money you have. Like if you go to a party with wealthy people, a lot of wealthy people are not gaudy. They're not going to sit around and say, well, you made $3 million. Well, I made $4 million. They don't do that. Like they're at Martha's Vineyard and they're talking about like oh, the iced tea is delightful, and oh, we love to come to the vineyard every year because the beaches are so nice and blah 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 blah. Right? They don't sit around and flaunt how much money they have. It's just kind of there. Like you just kind of know, yeah, we're probably all not poor, and that's it, right? So ultimately, I thought that was really fascinating that this guy felt compelled to brag about how much money he had. Also, I felt it was really unfortunate and a missed opportunity that when Chad Ochocinco steps up and kind of says, well, we can all shine easily, but we don't have to give our money away to do that, that it's taken in the wrong way. And obviously some would say the message was given in the wrong way, but it was really given in the wrong way if you consider the fact that we have just the wrong culture. Because I think that in some cultures where older men are respected, where fathers are respected, you would probably have the young person kind of say, yes, sir, and just listen and walk. I mean, remember, there was a time in the Black community where when an older man steps up and says, what are you doing? Like, don't do that, the young boy would say, yes, sir, and he would listen, right? So don't think that, I know that because I think the guy did a video in response and he's like, well, a man don't tell another man what to do with his money. A man don't tell another man to get in his pocket. He's like using the language and the vernacular that he kind of learned from the industry or whatever, right? Trying to fit into the culture or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but there's different levels of manhood, right? There is a young man, and then there is the older man. There is the youthful man, and then there's the wiser, older man who is mentoring the younger man. This mentorship is not something that just exists with humans. It exists with animals too. They showed a study where in the wildlife reserve, when the adolescent males did not have adult older elephants around, to guide them and tell them what to do, the adolescents started doing stupid stuff. They started going around killing the other animals, forming gangs, and doing all these terrible things in the reserve that they didn't know what to, they were like, we don't know what to do with these kids because there's no older men around. And they thought, well, they're just animals. They weren't thinking about this. But then they realized one of the what do they call it? I guess I don't know, let's call them animalologists, zoologists, whatever the hell they are. One of the zoologists was like, yeah, you're not. They don't have any guidance, any mentorship. You got rid of all the men. When you have no men in the community, let me tell you what happens. When there's no men in the community, there's absolute chaos. The women and children are not protected. The youth become adolescents. They stop listening to their mothers. They start forming gangs. They start going around engaging in a reckless behavior because there's nobody there to tell them, I told you so. So there's probably about 1 million young black men, maybe 500,000, maybe 200. I don't know what the number is, but there's probably hundreds of thousands of young black men right now in prison at 24 years old, at the prime of their lives, sitting in prison with 50-year sentences because they did things that they wouldn't have done if they had an older man in their ear saying, son, don't do this. You're going to ruin your life. Right. And they don't figure that out until years later. And so I encourage you to just, to observe this. This is definitely related to economics, right? We started talking about the economic thing, but it's deeper than just the economics, right? And so what Chad Ochocinco is basically saying is that being a wealthy person is far deeper than simply getting money and giving it away. In fact, giving the money away actually increases the chances you won't be wealthy. But if you want to brag about something, brag about the investment you made with the 325,000. If you want to do something good, show off the money if you want, and then go and buy some property. And then 2 years later, come back and say that $325,000 worth of property I bought is now worth $500,000, or it's now worth 600,000. Right? Brag about that. And just to give you a real life example of something that I just, in terms of, practicing what you preach and living that life or whatever, or stuff that happened in my own life. I had a young lady I mentored who came to me and asked to borrow like a lot of money. It's like $8,000 or $10,000. And for all my kids, all my guy kids, I call them my kids because they are my kids and I love them like that. I said, I'm going to do one big thing for you. One big thing that's going to give you an opportunity to have a come up. Other than when I die. When I die, they're going to be rich. But also one big thing in your life that's going to really help you make that move. So, but if you waste it, then it's up to you. That's on you. So she said, I want my one big thing to be, I want you to help me get a house. So she came and borrowed the money. It was like $8,000 to $10,000. I said, okay, no problem. I wrote the check. I talked to my wife about it. I wrote her the check, and she went. And I said, now I'm going to be watching to see if you actually follow through and buy the house. I'm not going to put any restrictions on you. You can take this money and spend it, right? She took the money. She put it down on the house. She bought the house. She bought the house for maybe, let's say, $240,000. She called me a year and a half later and said, I got my house appraised. That house that I bought for $240,000 is now worth $370,000. And that was awesome because not only was I extremely proud of her, like I was like, yes, way to go. Like we love it when our kids, take what we work hard for them to create for them and they take it to the next level. But the other piece of it was a wealth lesson. I said, now I want you to internalize this for a moment. Pay attention. You just made $130,000 doing absolutely nothing. You did no work. All you did was you lived in your house and you paid your bills every month like everybody else. But you made the amount of money that a lot of doctors make in a year sitting there just owning an asset. So this is one of the tiny ways I think you can actually instill those lessons in your children, because sometimes they have to see it. It's not just about saying it. It's about sort of saying it and seeing it at the same time, and seeing the opportunities to kind of say, now I want you to just look at that process. Like look at what happened there. And and then at that point, you don't have to teach anymore. At that point, you don't have to nag them. You don't have to push them and force them to listen to you because they get tired of listening to us. We talk too much sometimes. I know I do. Right. But if you just kind of say, hey, did you notice that little thing right there? Like then they take that with them and they move on with that. Right. So now, and here's the thing. When you show your child a situation like that where they made a bunch of money without doing any work, you can't go back. That's like, when I got my first girlfriend and I had sex for the first time, I was never going to forget about sex ever again, right? Right. Once you go black, you ain't going back, right? So once you've had a certain experience like that, once they've sort of seen, like, wait a minute, I made how much money without working? Then what do you think? You think they're gonna go work at Taco Bell now? For minimum wage? No. They in their mind, they're like, okay, now you've shown me that there are higher levels to the building. There's a penthouse in this building. I thought I was on the 10th floor. I thought that was the highest floor. You took me to the 24th floor. Now I'm not going down from that, right? So find those opportunities to do that with your kids. I think the stock market is a great opportunity to do that as well. You buy some stock for your kid, and then you spend $500, and then a year later it's worth $1,200, and you're like, look, you made this money. You didn't have to do any work. That helps them understand one important thing about ownership and control. Number one, ownership in itself is like more valuable than going to work every day. Ownership of assets is like working every day is like traveling on foot, right? That's your work. You're doing, the more you walk, the further you go. Owning assets, good assets over a long period of time, is like flying a jet airplane, right? A person on foot can't keep up with a person in a jet airplane, even if it's a raggedy airplane. Even if they're even on a bus, like you can't. You could be the fastest human being on the planet, and you can't keep up with a person that's riding a fat person riding a bus, right? So owning assets is where your income generation comes from a system and a mechanism that is not linked to you selling hours of your life. It's not linked to you selling your body, right? It's not linked to you getting up and going to work every morning. There's a process that's generating that wealth, but it's not your human capital. It's some other form of capital, right? And so LeBron James, for example, makes a lot of his money now by playing basketball. If he shows up and plays, the more he plays, the more money he makes. If he doesn't play, he makes less money. Well, in about 5 or 10 years, LeBron is going to be in Michael Jordan territory. Michael Jordan makes money even when he doesn't get out of bed, because Michael Jordan owns and controls much more than his body or just his personal brand. Michael Jordan now owns so many assets that he can't not make money. And the way this economy is structured, I saw an interesting post where they were explaining how inflation is beneficial to wealthy people and it harms the poor. And that's kind of true, but not totally true. But it's kind of just true enough that you can repeat that. But let me tell you why. The reason that inflation benefits the rich is because the rich tend to be people that got rich by owning and controlling assets. Remember, rich is not a static identity. Right? Rich is not, sometimes you're born rich and that's what you just are. But there's not. It's like being the best basketball player. Like if you are, use the Michael Jordan analogy, if you're the best basketball player, you're not the best just because your name is Michael Jordan. You're the best because there are things you do that make you into the best, right? So in addition to what you are, you're always becoming something. And what you're becoming is deeply connected to the habits that you have embraced. So people that are rich, many of them didn't start off rich. They became rich by doing what rich people do. Right? They don't give their money away. They tend to own assets. They want to control things, whatever. Right? So the reason rich people benefit from inflation is because most inflation, when they pump up the economy, and this pandemic was the perfect example. It's the perfect classroom to explain this concept. When the economy crashed, the first thing the Fed chairman did was he started pumping all this money into financial markets. He created what is called asset inflation. That is where you know it is it's so paradoxical. It's such a, I mean, it literally, I can understand if I'm a socialist or a Marxist, this would just infuriate me. Here's what's going on. They're pumping all this money into the economy, right? And they're like, yeah, we want to make the economy better. We want to make the economy better. They're not saying we want to make poor people better off. They're not saying we want to make working people better off. They're saying we want to make the economy better off. Well, what does that look like? Well, when they're pumping all this money into the economy with the bond buyback program, what they're doing is they're pumping up the prices of financial assets, creating what is called asset inflation. So that means that everybody who owns assets sees inflated values of their assets. So I own stock. I'm making money just because you're pumping up my stock price the way you pump up a tire on a bicycle. Then, or if I own real estate, well, then I benefit from real estate inflation. Now that there's so much money in the economy, people are bidding like crazy on these houses. The values of houses are going up. I own houses, so I'm making more money. Right. But also with that asset inflation comes inflation of other stuff, like stuff that you need, like food and all this other stuff. So if you're working class and you own no assets, you own and control nothing. All you do is you get up and you go to work every day. Pay attention. The price of everything is going up. You're trying to buy a house. Well, now the prices of houses are going up. You're trying to go to the grocery store. Now the prices of groceries are going up. The price of everything going up. Prices of cars are going up. Now here's the thing. It would be fair if your wages were going up at the rate of inflation, right? It would be fair if there's 6.2% inflation and you got an increase in your pay of 6.2%. But is that what's going to happen? Is that what happens in America? No, that's not what happens in America. Your wages stay the same. Like your wages stay the same because America doesn't give a damn about workers. America does not care about the sources of labor and the sources of capital. America cares about the people that own the capital, right? So what I would say to you is that the number one lesson to make sure your kids have that they fully embrace is the importance of owning and controlling assets. Once you own and control assets, you are able to still generate income, but you generate your income through a mechanism that is not linked to thousands of hours of your life. It's not linked to working yourself into an early grave. It's not linked to you having to submit and kiss some boss's butt every single day that you don't even like that person. It's connected to your simply positioning yourself as the owner and control of assets. It takes time to get there, though. It does take time. A lot of us start off as workers. I did. I started off as a worker. I had a job at Arby's when I was in college. When I got to college, Black Achievers, I'm making a $20,000 donation to the Black Achievers Foundation in Louisville, Kentucky, this year for this one reason. Black Achievers gave me a scholarship when nobody else would, and they gave me $500 to go to college. That is all they gave me, but that was enough to get me on that campus. At that point, I was trying to get a job. I tried to get a job at Bojangles, and Bojangles wasn't hiring, and I remember how depressed I was because I couldn't work at Bojangles, so I got a job at Hardee's. And I worked at Hardee's with these really horrible people that would go, and these guys, I didn't even know it. They would go and smoke cocaine in the bathroom. I didn't even know it. I was 18 being exposed to all this crap. And then I remember this old white lady pulling up in the driveway who was trying to like flirt with me and trying to have sex with me. I'm like, you're older than my mother. I don't want to sleep with you, lady. And then I talked to another guy and I said, that lady, I think that white lady wants to sleep with me. And he said, man, that lady's got money. Go ahead and have sex with her. I said, I don't want to live in this world. No. First of all, I would probably vomit if I tried to. And second of all, this don't seem right. So you know what led me to leave that job at Hardee's, actually? This is almost completely unrelated, but some of y'all can relate to this, I imagine. I left the job because one day a drunk white kid had come into the bathroom on a Saturday night and he puked everywhere and he was trying to take a dump and he crapped all over the toilet, like on the floor and everything. And they're like, boys, go in there and clean up that bathroom. And I said, I'm not doing, no, I quit. I'm out. I'm gone. Right. And I remember walking away from that job wondering if I did something wrong. I wrote a long letter to my mother. This was back when you wrote letters, right? We didn't have like email and all that stuff everywhere. And I wrote my mother a long letter and I said, was I wrong to quit my job? Like, was that bad? Because I had grown up in a culture where it was all about if you get the good job, you keep the good job, and some of y'all have gone through that where you quit your job and people think you're crazy, like almost like you're going to church and you started worshiping the devil or something. And now I look back on that and I just laugh, because there was so much more out there for me. I just had no idea. Right. And also the thing is that a lot of us have to pay our dues in order to go to that next level. But the next level is out there for you. It exists for you. Don't ever let anybody convince you on any level that you can't have upward mobility in this society. America ain't perfect. America has a lot of problems, but America does have some opportunities out there if you make good choices and do good things with the resources that you have. So I encourage you to do that. Keep learning, keep investing, build for yourself, learn the skills that wealthy people have, shift the culture that is around you, definitely manage and control that culture that's in your house, and do not do what everybody else is doing, because unfortunately America is also a society that is built upon, it is predicated upon the condition that there are still always going to be people who are going to fall for the okie doke, that there's always going to be people that want to be laborers no matter what. They don't want to own anything. They don't want to invest. They want to just spend. They want to go in debt and all this other stuff. So I'm encouraging you to simply go against the grain on that. Okay. All right. So let me answer a couple more of your questions and I'm going to bounce on out of here. Let's see. Marlon says, what are your thoughts on cannabis stocks? I love cannabis stocks. I think cannabis is going to be great in the future. Dr. Boyce, any thoughts on ATX, Artificial Intelligence Tech Solutions? I don't know that company. Send it to me next week. If you log in at the blackstockmarketprogram.com, there's a link where you can leave me questions for next week. I will answer those questions next week. And actually, before we get done, I'll even mention some stocks that I like. I told you guys I'd mention that, so I'm going to do that for you today. Let's see. PC says, is it a bad time to purchase a vehicle? I'm concerned about inflation. I don't think it's necessarily a bad time. I mean, it is harder because of the chip shortage, but I would not be afraid of doing that because I think, the chip shortage is temporary. And also, when we went to the car lot, we bought a car right in the middle of the chip shortages and all that. And they did tell us about that, but we still got the car we wanted. And we bought a 3-year-old car. Usually what I do is I find the car that I really want and I look at the brand new version, which is usually higher than the price I want to pay. And I'll just find a car just like it that's 2 or 3 years old. So you can wipe off some of the price from depreciation. So literally there was about a 35 to 40% difference in price between the new version of the car we wanted and the 3-year-old version of the car we wanted. Now, again, my wife and I were professionals. We have enough money to do what we want to do, but that wasn't something I wanted to waste my money on. So we got the 3-year-old car. All right. So just remember that when you buy a car. Otto says, Dr. Watkins, always a pleasure listening to you. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to see you as well. You mentioned earlier about psychology of money. Can you recommend any good books on the relationship of making money and how it affects us? Gosh, I can't think of anything because one of the weaknesses I would say that I have as a financial scholar is when you do stuff like this, like when you get a PhD in a field like this, you don't read a lot of like popular books. Like I read academic books. I read academic journals and, with research in it, or I'd read pieces of books to put together whatever it was I was trying to do. I wrote a book called Financial Lovemaking where I talk a lot about financial psychology there. I think Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I've heard great things about it. I've read a little bit of it. I've read a big chunk of it, not the whole thing. And I think generally, let me think here. What's another one? If somebody feel free to recommend some stuff in the chat because I am at a loss of, I think maybe the 4-Hour Work Week. I've heard good things about that. My brother likes that book. I read a book called Traction that talks about how to run a company and how to delegate. And so I tend to read things based on what I need to figure out at that time. So one of my challenges as a business owner was to learn how to not be a workhorse, not just be a workhorse, but to be a team player. And being a team player required the ability to manage relationships and delegate. And because I realized that was what I needed personally to go to the next level. And yes, of course, Dr. Anderson's books, Black Labor, White Wealth, and Powernomics, extremely important as well. And I like Powernomics, obviously, because Powernomics is just built on what we need as a people. And I think that that's really important. And by the way, on Wednesday nights, we're doing book club. We are reading Black Labor, White Wealth. We're on page, we're on page 152, and so we're almost done. It looks like we're about 60-70% of the way through the book. And so if you want to join us, you can go to blackkeystogreatness.com, or actually if you just go to boycewatkins.com and just look down to Black Keys to Greatness. That's my life class, and that'll also give you access to the book club. And let's see here. Do you have any pros and cons you can share about starting an investment club with friends or family members other than the obvious that some people you shouldn't do business with? Any suggested platforms to do this? Yeah, there's a platform. What's it called? TribeVest. TribeVest. I think it's available now. I invested in this startup actually. For full disclosure, I did invest in it, and I invested in it because I like it. And TribeVest is a good way, but there are lots of investment club apps that'll collect everybody's information and help you set up the bank account and kind of do it in a way where it's transparent for everybody. And so I suggest looking into something like that might allow you to form the investment club with your family. I would say also make sure people that you pick for certain roles are responsible people that understand, that are built for that role. So like a secretary, would want to keep up with records and everything else. The treasurer or the person, keeping up with the money has to be good at math, stuff like that. And I would encourage you to have fun. Investment clubs aren't just to make money. They're to the best benefits of investment clubs are relationship building, communication of ideas and opportunities, and also learning and knowledge, because you're learning from each other, you're learning from your guests, things like that. All right, so Linda says, don't forget your stock picks. Okay, so we're gonna hit some of the stock picks for the week. If you log in and look under what Dr. Boyce is buying, you can find some stuff there. The first stock that I really like for this week is actually Mastercard. I think Mastercard is one that I would buy. And actually, I am going to buy some Mastercard. I got some extra cash sitting around, so Mastercard's at the top of my priority list. I'll grab some more that I've been looking at here. And by the way, if you want to see the whole list, just log in at the blackstockmarketprogram.com, and you can see the list for this weekend, last